The wind howled across the Montana prairie, a mournful wail that carried the scent of sagebrush and the faint tang of rain. The sky, bruised purple at the edges, churned with the promise of a storm. Dr. Lena Crowfoot, a wildlife biologist with Blackfeet roots, stood at the rim of a shallow canyon, her boots crunching on brittle grass. Her dark braid whipped against her cheek as she scanned the vastness below, her hazel eyes sharp with years of tracking wildlife across these rugged lands. At 38, Lena had spent half her life studying the buffalo herds that roamed the American West, their massive forms a living testament to resilience. But nothing in her career had prepared her for what she saw now. Below, in the heart of the canyon, stood a lone buffalo bull. He was immense. 6 feet at the shoulder, nearly 2,000 pounds, his chestnut coat matted with dust and streaked with dark, glistening blood. His curved horns caught the fading sunlight, and his massive head hung low, breath puffing in heavy clouds. Lena's heart clenched. The bull was injured, a deep gash across his flank oozing steadily, yet he stood rooted to the spot, hooves planted like ancient oaks. He wasn't fleeing, wasn't charging, wasn't even grazing. Instead, he swayed slightly, his dark eyes fixed on something hidden in the grass at his feet. Lena adjusted her binoculars, her pulse quickening. "What are you doing, big guy?" she muttered, her voice swallowed by the wind. Buffalo were skittish around humans, their instincts honed by centuries of survival. But this one hadn't bolted when her truck rumbled into view an hour ago, nor when she'd crept closer on foot. That alone was enough to set her nerves on edge. She glanced back at her companion, Tom Redhawk, a local rancher who'd tipped her off about the bull. His weathered face was creased with worry under his cowboy hat. "He's been like that since dawn," Tom said, his voice low. "Just standing there. I thought he was dead at first, but, look at him. He's guarding something." Lena nodded, her mind racing. She'd seen buffalo protect their calves from wolves, even face down grizzlies, but this was different. The bull's stillness was deliberate, almost human in its intensity. She squinted through the binoculars again, catching the faint twitch of his ears, the shudder of his flank as he shifted his weight. Blood dripped onto the dry earth, pooling in the dust. He was in pain, yet he refused to move. "Let's get closer," Lena said, slinging her pack over her shoulder. It held a first aid kit, a radio, and a tranquilizer gun she hoped she wouldn't need. Tom hesitated, his hand resting on the rifle at his side. "You sure? He's hurt, Lena. Hurt animals are unpredictable." She met his gaze, her jaw set. "He's not acting like an animal right now. He's acting like he needs us." They descended the canyon's slope, the loose gravel crunching under their boots. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of earth and the musky odor of the buffalo. Lena's senses sharpened, the distant rumble of thunder, the faint rustle of grass, the bull's labored breathing like a bellows in the silence. As they approached, the buffalo's head swung toward them, his eyes locking onto Lena's. They were deep, liquid brown, glinting with something she couldn't name, resolve, perhaps, or desperation. For a moment, she froze, her breath catching. She'd studied buffalo her entire life, but she'd never felt one see her like this. "Easy now," she whispered, raising a hand. The bull snorted, a low rumble that vibrated through her chest, but he didn't charge. Instead, he took a single step back, revealing a patch of trampled grass beneath him. Lena's eyes widened. There, curled in a hollow of earth, was a koala. Small, gray, and utterly out of place in the Montana wilderness. Its fur was matted with blood, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. It let out a faint, pitiful whimper, barely audible over the wind. "A koala?" Tom's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Here? That's impossible." Lena's mind reeled. Koalas didn't belong in the American West, they were native to Australia, eucalyptus-dependent, fragile. Yet here one was, wounded and trembling, guarded by a buffalo bull who should have trampled it or fled hours ago. She crouched, her eyes darting between the koala and the buffalo. The bull's massive head lowered, his breath stirring the koala's fur. He nudged it gently, almost tenderly, and the koala whimpered again, its tiny claws twitching. "Tom, look at that," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. He's protecting it. Tom shook his head, his hand tightening on his rifle. From what? There's nothing out here but us. Lena's gaze swept the canyon, catching a flash of movement on the ridge above. A shadow, sleek and low, vanishing behind a boulder. Her stomach twisted. Nothing, she said, pointing. Look. Tom followed her gaze, his face paling. Cougar, he muttered. Big one, too. Lena's pulse hammered. A cougar, likely a mountain lion, would explain the buffalo's wounds and the koala's injuries. But it didn't explain why a buffalo, a creature built for stampeding across prairies, would stand guard over a foreign animal half its size. She edged closer, her hand hovering over the tranquilizer gun. The buffalo's eyes tracked her, but he didn't move, his massive body a shield between the koala and the unseen predator. Lena, we need to call for backup, Tom said, his voice tight. That cougar's not gone. And this bull, he's not gonna let us near that thing without a fight. Lena shook her head, her eyes locked on the buffaloes. He's not fighting us. He's asking for help. The words felt absurd even as she said them, but she couldn't shake the conviction. The buffalo's behavior wasn't instinct, it was deliberate, intelligent, almost sacrificial. He was bleeding, exhausted, yet he stood firm, his massive frame trembling with effort. Lena's chest ached with a mix of awe and urgency. Whatever had brought this koala here, whatever had driven this buffalo to protect it, was a story she needed to unravel. But first, she had to act. She took a slow step forward, her voice soft. Hey, big guy. I see you. I know you're hurting. Let me help. The buffalo snorted again, his head dipping lower. For a moment, she thought he'd charge, his hooves pawing the ground, kicking up clouds of dust. But then he shifted, revealing the koala fully. Its small body was curled tight, its breathing shallow. Lena's heart lurched. The koala was alive, but barely. And the buffalo, Thunderheart, she named him in that moment, was risking everything to keep it that way. A low growl echoed from the ridge above, and Lena's head snapped up. The cougar was still there, watching, waiting. Time was running out. She glanced at Tom, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. Get the radio. Call the team. We're not losing either of them. As Tom scrambled for the radio, Lena knelt beside the buffalo, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. The storm was closing in, the wind now a roar, and the cougar's eyes glinted in the shadows. Thunderheart's deep bellow rumbled through the canyon, a sound of defiance and trust. Lena didn't know how a koala had ended up here, or why a buffalo would risk its life to save it, but she knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The canyon's wind had sharpened into a biting gust, carrying the first spatters of rain as the storm loomed closer. Lena Crowfoot crouched a few feet from Thunderheart, the massive buffalo bull, her eyes darting between his blood-streaked flank and the trembling koala at his hooves. The air was thick with the musky scent of the buffalo, the metallic tang of blood, and the faint, incongruous eucalyptus-like odor from the koala. Lena's heart pounded, her mind grappling with the impossible scene, a wounded buffalo guarding an Australian marsupial in the heart of Montana's wilderness. Above, the cougar's shadow had vanished, but its presence lingered like a tightening noose. Tom Redhawk's voice crackled over the radio. Lena, teams on the way, Dr. Martinez and a couple rangers. ETA 20 minutes. You sure about this? Lena didn't take her eyes off Thunderheart. His massive head swayed, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt almost human. I'm sure, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. Tell them to bring a stretcher and a vet kit. The koala's in bad shape. Tom muttered something about crazy biologists but relayed the message. Lena inched closer, her boots sinking into the dampening earth. Thunderheart's breath came in heavy puffs, each one a testament to his pain and determination. The gash on his flank was deep, likely from the cougar's claws, and his left leg trembled under his weight. Yet he stood firm, his massive body a fortress around the koala. Lena's chest tightened with awe. She'd studied buffalo behavior for years, her Blackfeet grandmother had called them the heartbeat of the prairie, but this was beyond instinct. This was purpose. Hey, Thunderheart, she murmured, keeping her voice low and soothing. I'm not here to hurt you. I need to check on your friend. The name felt right, a nod to the strength radiating from him despite his wounds. The buffalo snorted, a low rumble that vibrated through the ground, but he didn't move. His eyes flicked to the koala, then back to Lena, as if assessing her intent. The koala whimpered again, a faint, heart-wrenching sound. Lena leaned forward, her breath catching as she got a clearer look. Its gray fur was matted with blood, one hind leg twisted grotesquely, and its small chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. It was young, barely the size of a house cat, and utterly out of place in this rugged landscape. Lena's mind raced. A koala in Montana could only mean human interference, an escaped pet, an illegal exotic trade, or something stranger. But why was Thunderheart protecting it? And how had they both ended up in this canyon, hunted by a cougar? Lena, you're too close, Tom warned, his voice tight. He stood a few yards back, rifle still in hand, his eyes scanning the ridge for the cougar. If that bull decides you're a threat. He won't, Lena said, though her pulse betrayed her certainty. She reached into her pack, pulling out a small flashlight. The beam illuminated the koala's face, revealing a bloodied ear and a single glossy eye blinking up at her. It let out a soft, plaintive cry, and Thunderheart's head lowered, his nose brushing the koala's side with a gentleness that made Lena's breath catch. The buffalo's thick woolly coat, dusted with dirt and blood, seemed to absorb the fading light, making him appear even larger, a monument of resilience. Easy, big guy, Lena whispered. She glanced at the surrounding ground, her biologist's instincts kicking in. The grass was trampled in a wide circle around Thunderheart, suggesting he'd been standing guard for hours. A trail of scuffed earth led away from the koala, marked by faint bloodstains, and Lena's eyes narrowed, a single human-made boot print, half erased by the wind. Her stomach twisted. Someone had been here. Tom, you see this? She called, pointing to the print. He jogged over, crouching beside her. Looks fresh, he said, his voice grim. Too small for a rancher. Maybe a kid's. A kid. Lena's mind flashed to the koala's presence, the cougar's attack, the buffalo's unwavering vigil. A human child out here was unlikely, but the print raised questions she couldn't ignore. She stood, her eyes following the trail. It led toward a cluster of boulders at the canyon's edge, where the grass was matted and stained with more blood, too much for just the koala. Before she could investigate, the rumble of an engine echoed through the canyon. A Park Service truck crested the ridge, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Dr. Sophia Martinez, a veterinarian with a reputation for handling tough cases, leapt out, followed by two rangers carrying medical supplies. Sophia's dark eyes widened as she took in the scene. A koala, she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. Lena, what the hell is going on? I wish I knew, Lena replied, gesturing to Thunderheart. He's been guarding it. Took on a cougar, from the looks of his wounds. We need to stabilize them both, but he's not letting anyone near without a fight. Sophia approached cautiously, her vet kit slung over her shoulder. He's massive, she murmured, her tone a mix of awe and concern. That gash needs stitches, and he's losing blood fast. But if he's protecting that koala, we'll have to sedate him. No sedation, Lena said firmly. Not yet. He's calm with me. Let's try trust first. Sophia raised an eyebrow but nodded. Your call, but if he charges, we're out of options. Lena took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Thunderheart's. I'm going to touch the koala, she said, her voice steady. I need you to let me. She moved slowly, her hand extended, palm up. Thunderheart's ears twitched, and he let out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed off the canyon walls. The rangers tensed, hands on their tranquilizer guns, but Lena didn't flinch. She held his gaze, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. To her astonishment, Thunderheart stepped back, just enough to give her access to the koala. His massive hooves thudded against the earth, and he lowered his head, his breath warm against her arm. Lena's hands trembled as she reached for the koala, her fingers brushing its matted fur. It was alive, but its pulse was weak, its body cold. She wrapped it gently in a blanket from her pack, cradling it like a child. "Good boy," she whispered to Thunderheart, her voice thick with emotion. "You did good." Sophia knelt beside her, already preparing a syringe with fluids for the koala. "This is unreal," she said, her hands moving quickly. "Buffalo don't do this. They don't guard other species, especially not something this alien." "They do now," Lena said, her eyes still on Thunderheart. His gaze hadn't left her, and she saw something new in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or trust. It sent a shiver down her spine. Tom's voice broke the moment. "Lena, over here." He was at the boulders, his flashlight illuminating a pile of torn fabric and a small, bloodied backpack. Lena's heart sank as she joined him, the koala still in her arms. The backpack was child-sized, its straps frayed as if torn in a struggle. Inside was a crumpled note, the ink smudged but legible. "Please, take her. Keep her safe." Lena's breath caught. "Her?" she whispered, glancing at the koala, then at the trail of blood leading deeper into the canyon. The boot print, the note, the koala's presence, it all pointed to a human story, one Thunderheart had stumbled into. The buffalo's bellow echoed again, softer this time, almost mournful. Lena looked back at him, his massive form silhouetted against the storm-dark sky, and realized the mystery was far from solved. The koala was only part of it. Something, or someone, else was out there, and Thunderheart's vigil wasn't over. "Tom, get the rangers to follow that trail," Lena said, her voice urgent. "Sophia, stabilize the koala. I'm staying with him." She nodded toward Thunderheart, whose eyes still held hers, unwavering. The rain began to fall, heavy drops splattering the dust. The canyon seemed to close in, the air electric with questions. Who had left the koala? Whose blood stained the grass? And why had a buffalo risked everything to protect it? Lena didn't know, but as Thunderheart's deep, steady breaths filled the silence, she knew she'd follow him to find out. The rain lashed the Montana Canyon, turning the earth to slick mud under Lena Crowfoot's boots. Thunder rumbled, closer now, as the storm broke over the prairie. The air was sharp with ozone and the musky scent of wet buffalo fur. Lena knelt beside Thunderheart, the massive buffalo bull, her hands steady despite the chaos. The koala, wrapped in a blanket, lay cradled in Dr. Sophia Martinez's arms, its faint whimpers barely audible over the wind. Thunderheart's dark eyes tracked Lena's every move, his massive frame trembling from the gash on his flank, yet his hooves remained planted, guarding the patch of earth where the koala had been. The child-sized backpack, its cryptic note, "Please, take her. Keep her safe," lay nearby, a haunting clue to a deeper mystery. Lena's heart pounded as she scanned the canyon. The rangers, Jake and Maria, had followed the bloodied trail toward the boulders, their flashlights flickering in the downpour. Tom Redhawk stood a few yards away, his rifle trained on the ridge where the cougar had last been seen. The predator's presence loomed, its low growl earlier a warning that it wasn't gone. Lena's breath caught as she glanced at Thunderheart. His curved horns gleamed wetly, his chestnut coat plastered to his 2,000-pound frame. Blood seeped from his wound, mixing with the rain, yet he stood resolute, his deep bellows vibrating through the ground like a heartbeat. "Lena, we can't stay here," Sophia called, her voice tight as she administered fluids to the koala. "This storm's getting worse, and that cougar's still out there. We need to move them both." Lena nodded, but her eyes were on the trail the rangers had taken. The note's words gnawed at her. Her. Was it the koala, or something, someone else? The boot print, the blood, the backpack, it all pointed to a human presence, and Thunderheart's vigil suggested he knew more than they did. She wiped rain from her face, her Blackfeet heritage grounding her in the moment. Her grandmother's stories spoke of buffalo as protectors, spirits of the prairie. Thunderheart was living up to that legacy, but at what cost? "Jake, Maria, anything?" Lena shouted, her voice nearly lost in the storm. Maria's voice crackled over the radio. "Found something. Tracks. Human, small. Leading to a crevice in the rocks. Oh God, Lena, there's a kid." Lena's stomach lurched. She met Thunderheart's gaze, seeing the same resolve she'd felt since spotting him. "A kid," she whispered. "You were guarding her too, weren't you?" Sophia's head snapped up. "A kid? Out here? How?" "No time," Lena cut in, her pulse racing. "Sophia, keep the koala stable. Tom, cover us. I'm going to the crevice." Tom's face hardened. "Lena, that cougar's still hunting. You can't go alone." "Thunderheart's with me," she said, the words coming unbidden. She turned to the buffalo, her hand outstretched. "Show me, big guy. Show me where she is." Thunderheart snorted, his massive head swinging toward the boulders. He took a step, his hooves sinking into the mud, and Lena followed, her heart in her throat. The buffalo's limp was pronounced, his wounded leg buckling slightly, but he moved with purpose, leading her toward the crevice. The rain stung her eyes, and her boots slipped on the slick ground, but she matched his pace, trusting his instinct. His bellows echoed, deep and resonant, a beacon in the storm. They reached the boulders, where Jake and Maria crouched beside a narrow crevice, their flashlights illuminating a small, huddled figure. A girl, no older than 5, curled tightly against the rock, her clothes torn and soaked. Her dark hair was plastered to her pale face, and her eyes were wide with fear. A faint scratch marked her cheek, and her small hands clutched a eucalyptus leaf, its edges crumpled. "Lena, she's alive," Maria called, her voice shaking. "But she's hypothermic. We need to get her out now." Lena's gaze flicked to Thunderheart. He stood at the crevice's edge, his massive body shielding the opening from the wind. His eyes locked onto the girl, and he let out a soft, almost tender grunt, his breath steaming in the cold air. Lena's chest tightened. He'd been guarding both the koala and this child, defying a cougar and his own pain to protect them. "Thunderheart, you're incredible," she whispered, her voice thick. She turned to the rangers. "We need to move her, but carefully. He's protective." Jake nodded, his face grim. "We'll need to distract him. He's not gonna let us near her without a fight." "No," Lena said, her voice firm. "He'll let me." She stepped closer to Thunderheart, her hand hovering near his wet flank. "I'm getting her out, okay? Trust me." The buffalo's ears twitched, and for a moment, she thought he'd charge. His massive shoulders tensed, his hooves pawing the mud. But then he stepped back, just enough to clear the crevice, his eyes never leaving hers. Lena's breath caught at the trust in his gaze, a bond forged in this impossible moment. She knelt at the crevice, her voice soft. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm Lena. I'm here to help you." The girl whimpered, her small body shivering. Koala, she mumbled, clutching the eucalyptus leaf tighter. Lena's heart clenched. "She's safe. Thunderheart kept her safe, and now we're gonna keep you safe." She glanced at the buffalo, his massive form a steady presence beside her. She reached into the crevice, her hands gentle as she lifted the girl, wrapping her in her own jacket. The child was light, fragile, her skin icy against Lena's. As she emerged, Thunderheart's head lowered, his nose brushing the girl's hair. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberate, that Maria gasped. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. Lena carried the girl to Sophia, who was already preparing a thermal blanket. "She's hypothermic, but stable," Sophia said, her hands moving quickly. "The koala's hanging on, too. We need to get them both to the truck." A low growl cut through the rain, and Lena's head snapped up. The cougar's eyes glinted from the ridge, closer now, its sleek form crouched against the storm. Tom raised his rifle, but Lena grabbed his arm. "Don't shoot. Thunderheart's got this." The buffalo turned, his massive body squaring toward the cougar. He bellowed, a sound that shook the canyon, his horns lowered like a warrior's shield. The cougar hesitated, its tail twitching, then slunk back into the shadows. Lena's breath escaped in a rush. Thunderheart had faced it down again, protecting them all. "Move now," Lena shouted. She carried the girl, Sophia cradled the koala, and the rangers flanked them as they hurried to the truck. Thunderheart followed, his limp more pronounced, his breathing labored. Lena's heart ached for him, but there was no time to tend his wounds yet. The girl and the koala needed immediate care. They reached the truck, and Sophia settled the girl and koala inside, the heater blasting. Lena turned to Thunderheart, who stood a few yards away, his massive form silhouetted against the lightning. "You're not done yet, are you?" she said softly. His eyes met hers, and she saw the same resolve, the same fire that had kept him standing through pain and storm. "Lena, we can't leave him," Maria said, her voice urgent. "He's bleeding out." "I know," Lena replied, her mind racing. The girl's presence, the koala, the note, it was all connected, but the answers were still out there. Thunderheart's wounds needed treatment, and the cougar was still a threat. But as she looked at the buffalo, his steady gaze anchoring her, she knew one thing. He'd saved 2 lives today, and she'd do whatever it took to save his. The rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the Montana canyon slick and gleaming under a fractured sky. Lena Crowfoot stood outside a temporary enclosure at the edge of the prairie, her boots caked with mud, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. The buffalo bull's massive frame filled the pen, his chestnut coat still matted but cleaner now, the deep gash on his flank stitched and bandaged by Dr. Sophia Martinez. His breathing was steadier, his dark eyes brighter, though they still carried that unshakable resolve. The koala, now named Eucalyptus by the team, rested in a heated crate in the nearby mobile vet unit, its broken leg splinted and its vitals stabilizing. The little girl, identified as Mia through a missing persons report, was safe in a local hospital, her condition improving. But the mystery of how they'd all ended up in that canyon clung to Lena like the damp chill in the air. The enclosure smelled of fresh straw and antiseptic, a stark contrast to the wild sagebrush and blood of the previous night. Thunderheart's hooves scuffed the ground, his massive head swinging toward Lena as she approached. She'd spent the last 12 hours by his side, watching Sophia work, her Blackfeet heritage grounding her in the buffalo's quiet strength. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind. Buffalo were the prairie's soul, protectors of life. Thunderheart had proven that, risking everything for a child and a creature from another world. "Lena, he's a fighter," Sophia said, emerging from the vet unit, her dark hair pulled back, her face lined with exhaustion but lit with awe. "His vitals are strong, and the infection's under control. But that koala, it's a miracle it survived. And the girl, Mia, she's asking for the big cow." Lena's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Thunderheart's no cow. He's a guardian." She glanced at the buffalo, his ears twitching as if he understood. His coat, though still dull from blood loss, was regaining its luster, each strand catching the morning light. She reached through the fence, her fingers brushing his woolly flank. He didn't flinch, only let out a soft grunt, his breath warm against her hand. Tom Redhawk approached, his cowboy hat tilted back, a satellite phone in hand. "Sheriff's got a lead on Mia's parents," he said, his voice low. "Found a car abandoned 10 miles west, rental, registered to a couple from Sydney, Australia. No sign of them yet, but there was a crate in the trunk. Smelled like eucalyptus." Lena's heart sank. "Smuggled," she said, the word bitter. "The koala must have been theirs. But why bring a child and a koala out here?" Tom shrugged, his eyes on Thunderheart. "Desperation, maybe. Sheriff thinks they were running from something. Found a fake passport in the car, and some cash. They're digging deeper." Lena's mind churned. The note, "Please, take her. Keep her safe," flashed in her memory, its smudged ink a plea. Mia's parents, the koala, the cougar's attack, it was a puzzle with too many missing pieces. She turned back to Thunderheart, who pawed the ground gently, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if he could still sense the canyon's pull. "You knew they needed you," she murmured. "How did you know?" Sophia joined them, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I've been reading up on buffalo behavior," she said. "They're social, protective, but this? Guarding a human child and a koala? It's unprecedented. I called a colleague at the university. They're sending a team to study him. They think he might be from a rare genetic lineage, one of the last purebred bison from the original plains herds." Lena's eyes widened. Purebred. That would make him a living relic. Her Blackfeet ancestors had revered such buffalo, their survival a testament to the land's resilience. She looked at Thunderheart, his massive shoulders a silhouette against the dawn, and felt a surge of responsibility. He wasn't just a buffalo, he was a symbol, a bridge between past and present. The rumble of tires interrupted her thoughts. A news van pulled up, followed by a Park Service SUV. A reporter, a young woman with a microphone and a determined expression, stepped out, her cameraman already filming. "Dr. Crowfoot," she called. "I'm Claire Nguyen with Montana Public Radio. We heard about the buffalo saving a child and a koala. Can you comment?" Lena's jaw tightened. She'd hoped to keep this quiet until they had answers, but the story was spreading. She glanced at Thunderheart, who snorted softly, his eyes meeting hers with a calm that steadied her. "He's not just a buffalo," she said, stepping forward. "His name's Thunderheart, and he risked his life to protect two vulnerable creatures. We're still figuring out why, but he's shown us something extraordinary." Claire's eyes lit up. "Extraordinary how? Are you saying he's intelligent?" "I'm saying he's more than we thought," Lena replied, her voice firm. "He stood against a cougar, stayed with a child and a koala through a storm. That's not just instinct. That's compassion." The cameraman zoomed in on Thunderheart, who stood unmoved, his massive head lowered as if acknowledging the attention. Claire scribbled notes. "This could change how people see buffalo. We're airing this tonight. National networks might pick it up." Lena nodded, though her stomach twisted. Publicity could help protect Thunderheart, but it could also draw poachers or thrill-seekers. She turned to Sophia. "We need to move him to a secure sanctuary. Soon." "Already on it," Sophia said. "There's a preserve near Billings with a veterinary team. They're prepping a space for him and eucalyptus. But we'll need funding and approval." Tom chimed in. "I know folks at the tribal council. They'll want to protect him, especially if he's purebred. I'll make some calls." As the news crew filmed, Lena walked back to the enclosure, her hand resting on the fence. Thunderheart's eyes followed her, and she felt the weight of their bond. She'd spent her career studying buffalo, but this one had taught her something new. Their capacity for selflessness, for connection across species. She leaned closer, her voice low. "You're gonna be okay, big guy. We'll make sure of it." Her thoughts drifted to Mia, now recovering in the hospital. The girl had spoken briefly, her words fragmented. "Koala, my friend, Big Cow saved us." Lena had learned from the sheriff that Mia's parents were likely involved in an illegal wildlife trade, fleeing Australia with eucalyptus as contraband. The car crash, the cougar, Mia's escape, it explained the chaos, but not Thunderheart's role. Why had he stayed? How had he found them? A ranger approached, holding a small, bloodied tag found near the crevice. It was a wildlife tracker, its serial number linked to an Australian zoo. Eucalyptus had been stolen, likely intended for a black market buyer. Lena's fists clenched. Thunderheart had stumbled into a human mess, yet he'd chosen to protect, to stand firm. She looked at him, his steady breaths a rhythm against the prairie's quiet, and felt a surge of determination. "Tom, get the council to push for a sanctuary," she said. "Sophia, prep Thunderheart and eucalyptus for transport. I'm going to the hospital to talk to Mia. She might know more." As the team moved into action, Lena took one last look at Thunderheart. His coat shimmered in the morning light, his wounds a testament to his sacrifice. The news crew's camera whirred, capturing his majesty, but Lena saw more, a creature who'd rewritten her understanding of the wild. The story wasn't over, Mia's parents were still missing, and the tracker raised questions about a larger network. But as Thunderheart's deep grunt echoed, Lena knew she'd fight for him, for eucalyptus, for Mia. The prairie's heartbeat was alive in them all, and she wouldn't let it fade. The late summer sun dipped low over the Montana prairie, casting golden streaks across the rolling grasslands of the newly established Two Rivers Sanctuary. Lena Crowfoot stood at the edge of a vast enclosure, her boots sinking into the soft earth, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. The buffalo bull, now fully recovered, stood tall at 6 feet, his 2,000-pound frame a monument of strength. His chestnut coat gleamed, the once matted fur now thick and lustrous, the stitched gash on his flank a faint scar beneath the woolly hide. His curved horns caught the light, and his deep, resonant bellow echoed across the preserve, a sound that stirred Lena's heart. Nearby, in a shaded enclosure, Eucalyptus the koala clung to a man-made eucalyptus tree, her splinted leg healed, her gray fur fluffy and clean. Mia, the 5-year-old girl Thunderheart had protected, was back with a foster family, her recovery steady but her story far from over. Lena's fingers grazed the wooden fence, the scent of sagebrush and fresh grass filling her lungs. The sanctuary, a 500-acre haven funded by the Blackfeet Tribal Council and a surge of public donations, was Thunderheart's new home. It had been 3 months since that stormy night in the canyon, when he'd stood guard over Mia and Eucalyptus, defying a cougar and his own pain. The story had spread like wildfire, fueled by Claire Nguyen's news report and viral videos of Thunderheart's protective stance. Scientists, conservationists, and even politicians had taken notice, hailing him as a symbol of the American West's resilience. But for Lena, it was personal. Thunderheart had changed her, rekindling a purpose she hadn't known she'd lost. "Lena, you did it," Tom Redhawk said, approaching with a grin, his cowboy hat tilted back. "The council just approved the sanctuary's expansion. They're calling it Thunderheart's Legacy." Lena's throat tightened. "It's his doing, not mine," she said, her eyes on the buffalo. Thunderheart grazed a few yards away, his massive head dipping to tear at the grass, but his ears twitched toward her voice. She'd spent countless hours with him since the rescue, helping Sophia stabilize his wounds, advocating for his protection. Each visit deepened their bond, a silent understanding that transcended species. She'd always respected Buffalo, but Thunderheart was different. He'd shown her a depth of compassion she'd never imagined. Sophia emerged from the koala enclosure, her vet kit slung over her shoulder. "Eucalyptus is thriving," she said, her voice bright. "She's even started climbing again. And Mia's foster parents say she talks about Thunderheart non-stop. Wants to visit him." Lena smiled, picturing Mia's small hands clutching that eucalyptus leaf in the canyon. The girl's recovery had been a beacon of hope, but her parents' fate remained a shadow. The sheriff's investigation had uncovered a grim truth. Mia's parents, Australian nationals, had been entangled in an international wildlife trafficking ring. They'd smuggled Eucalyptus from a zoo, intending to sell her to a collector in the States. Their car crash in the Montana wilderness was no accident. Rival traffickers had sabotaged it, leaving Mia and Eucalyptus to fend for themselves. Thunderheart, grazing nearby, had found them, standing guard against the cougar that had scented easy prey. The parents were still missing, presumed dead, but Lena held out hope for Mia's sake. The sanctuary's creation was a direct result of Thunderheart's story. Lena had faced bureaucratic hurdles, skeptical officials, budget disputes, but the public's outpouring of support had tipped the scales. Claire's report had sparked a movement, with donations pouring in from across the globe. A university team, led by a behavioral ecologist, had begun studying Thunderheart, documenting his intelligence and social behavior. Their preliminary findings suggested buffalo might possess a level of emotional complexity rivaling elephants or dolphins, a revelation that was reshaping conservation policies. The Blackfeet Council had even proposed a cultural education program, weaving Thunderheart's story into their teachings about the buffalo's sacred role. Lena walked toward the enclosure, her boots crunching on the gravel path. Thunderheart lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. He ambled closer, his massive shoulders rolling, and let out a soft grunt, his breath warm against her outstretched hand. She touched his flank, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his coat. "You're home, big guy," she whispered. "You did this." Her thoughts drifted to her own transformation. Before Thunderheart, Lena had been adrift, her career a series of grants and field reports, her Blackfeet roots a quiet pride but not a calling. She'd grown up hearing her grandmother's stories of buffalo as kin, but she'd seen them through a scientist's lens, data points, not spirits. Thunderheart had shattered that. His choice to protect Mia and Eucalyptus, to trust Lena in the storm, had reawakened her connection to the land, to her people's legacy. She'd started working with the tribal council, advocating not just for Thunderheart but for all buffalo, pushing for expanded grazing lands and anti-poaching measures. A small SUV pulled up, and Mia stepped out, holding her foster mother's hand. The girl's dark hair was tied back, her cheeks pink with health, but her eyes carried a quiet weight. She ran to the fence, her small hands gripping the wood. "Thunder!" she called, her voice bright. Thunderheart's head swung toward her, and he took a step closer, his massive form gentle as he lowered his head. Mia giggled, reaching through the fence, and Lena's heart swelled as Thunderheart nudged her hand, his nose soft against her fingers. "He remembers her," Sophia said, her voice soft with wonder. "Of course he does," Lena replied. She knelt beside Mia, her voice gentle. "He kept you safe, didn't he?" Mia nodded, her eyes shining. "He's my friend. And Koala's my friend too." Lena glanced at the koala enclosure, where Eucalyptus was nibbling a eucalyptus leaf. The sanctuary had secured a permit to keep her, given her stolen status and the risk of returning her to Australia's black market. Mia's foster parents were working with social services to ensure her stability, and Lena had promised to bring her to the sanctuary whenever she wanted. It was a small victory, but it felt profound, a family forged in the wake of Thunderheart's courage. As the sun dipped lower, painting the prairie in hues of amber and crimson, Lena felt a sense of closure. The sanctuary was thriving, Thunderheart was safe, and Mia was healing. But the broader fight wasn't over. The trafficking ring that had endangered them was still active, and buffalo herds across the west faced habitat loss and poaching. Lena had testified before a state conservation board, her voice steady as she described Thunderheart's actions, urging stronger protections. The board was now drafting a bill to fund buffalo restoration, inspired by his story. She looked at Thunderheart, his silhouette a testament to resilience, and felt a quiet resolve. He'd given her a purpose, to protect not just him, but the wild heart of the prairie. As Mia waved goodbye and the last light faded, Lena whispered to Thunderheart, "We're not done yet, are we?" His deep bellow answered, a promise that their bond would endure, a spark to ignite change. The prairie stretched boundless under a late August sky, its grasses swaying in a warm breeze that carried the scent of sage and sun-warmed earth. At the heart of the Two Rivers Sanctuary, Lena Crowfoot stood on a gentle rise, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. The buffalo bull, now a living legend, grazed in the distance, his massive 2,000-pound frame a silhouette against the sunset. His chestnut coat shimmered, the scar on his flank a faint reminder of the night he'd stood guard over Mia and Eucalyptus, defying a cougar and a storm. His curved horns caught the dying light, and his deep bellow rolled across the sanctuary, a sound that felt like the prairie's own heartbeat. Nearby, Eucalyptus dozed in her eucalyptus tree, her gray fur soft and full, a quiet survivor of the same impossible night. Mia, now 6, stood beside Lena, her small hand clutching a woven bracelet, a gift from her foster mother, etched with a buffalo charm. Lena's boots sank into the soft earth, the sanctuary's 500 acres a testament to Thunderheart's impact. In the year since his rescue, the preserve had grown, its fences now enclosing a thriving herd of buffalo, their hoofbeats a rhythm of renewal. The Blackfeet Tribal Council had named it Thunderheart's Legacy, a nod to the bull's role as a catalyst for change. Lena's advocacy, fueled by his story, had led to a state bill protecting buffalo habitats, signed into law just weeks ago. Universities across the country were studying Thunderheart's behavior, their research confirming what Lena had felt in her bones. Buffalo possessed an emotional intelligence that rivaled the most revered species, a discovery reshaping conservation policies and public perception. The air was warm, tinged with the faint sweetness of wildflowers, and Lena's heart swelled as she watched Thunderheart. He'd become more than a buffalo, an ambassador for his kind, a symbol of resilience and compassion. Visitors flocked to the sanctuary, their donations funding education programs that wove Blackfeet's stories of the buffalo's sacred role into modern conservation. Lena, once a solitary biologist, now led these efforts, her Blackfeet heritage no longer a quiet pride but a guiding force. Thunderheart had reconnected her to her roots, to the land her grandmother had called kin. "Lena, look." Mia's voice broke her thoughts, her small finger pointing. Thunderheart had lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto them across the field. He ambled closer, his massive shoulders rolling, his hooves stirring clouds of dust. Mia giggled, her bracelet glinting as she waved. Thunderheart stopped a few feet from the fence, his breath a soft huff, and lowered his head, nudging the air toward her. Lena's throat tightened. The bond between them, forged in that stormy canyon, was unbroken, a quiet miracle. "He knows you, Mia," Lena said, kneeling beside her. "He always will." Mia nodded, her eyes bright. "He's my hero. Him and Koala." She glanced at Eucalyptus's enclosure, where the koala was nibbling a fresh leaf, her recovery complete. The sanctuary had secured permanent care for her, a small victory against the wildlife trafficking ring that had brought her to Montana. Mia's foster parents, supported by social services, were providing her a stable home, and she visited Thunderheart weekly, her laughter a balm for the wounds of her past. The search for her parents had ended in tragedy, their bodies found in a remote ravine, victims of the same traffickers who'd targeted Eucalyptus. But Mia's resilience, like Thunderheart's, was a light in the darkness. Tom Redhawk approached, his cowboy hat dusted with pollen, a tablet in hand. "Lena, the council just sent over the new education program outline," he said. "They're using Thunderheart's story in schools nationwide. And the research team wants to name a buffalo cognition study after him." Lena smiled, her eyes still on Thunderheart. "He's changing the world, Tom. One heart at a time." Sophia Martinez joined them, her vet kit slung over her shoulder, her face glowing with pride. "The herd's thriving," she said. "And Eucalyptus is a star. Kids love her. We're even getting requests for a children's book about them." Lena laughed softly, the sound mingling with the prairie's hum. The sanctuary had become a beacon, drawing scientists, reporters, and families. Claire Nguyen's initial report had sparked a global movement, with Thunderheart's image on conservation posters and social media campaigns. The hashtag Thunderheart Legacy trended for weeks, inspiring petitions for stronger anti-poaching laws and habitat restoration. Lena had spoken at conferences, her voice steady as she described Thunderheart's sacrifice, urging people to see wildlife not as resources but as kin. As the sun sank, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Lena led Mia to a small plaque at the sanctuary's entrance. It read, "Thunderheart's Legacy, for the buffalo who taught us compassion transcends species." Lena touched the plaque, her fingers tracing the words. She thought of her grandmother, who'd told her buffalo carried the prairie's soul. Thunderheart had carried more, a lesson in love, trust, and sacrifice that had transformed her life. She turned to Mia, her voice soft. "What did Thunderheart teach you, sweetheart?" Mia tilted her head, her bracelet catching the light. "He taught me to be brave, and to take care of my friends." Lena's eyes stung, and she looked out at Thunderheart, now grazing peacefully with the herd. His bellow echoed, deep and resonant, a call that felt like it reached beyond the prairie, beyond species, to the heart of what it meant to be alive. She thought of the challenges ahead. Poaching still threatened buffalo, habitats were shrinking, and trafficking rings persisted. But Thunderheart's story was a spark, igniting change, inspiring action. To you, reading this, his story carries a challenge. Look at the wild around you, the creatures who share this earth. Have you ever seen an animal's courage change your perspective? Have you felt the pull of connection across boundaries? Thunderheart stood for a child and a koala, defying instinct to protect what was vulnerable. His legacy lives in the sanctuary, in Mia's laughter, in the policies protecting his kind. But it lives in you, too. Support conservation, share his story, or simply pause to listen to the wild. Compassion, like Thunderheart's, is a force that can reshape the world. What will you do with it? As the last light faded, Lena took Mia's hand, and they stood together, watching Thunderheart's silhouette against the stars. The prairie hummed with life, and Lena felt her grandmother's spirit in the wind, whispering, "The buffalo's heart beats for us all."